Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and I have the pleasure of welcoming my book friend David from Four Corners of the Page. David, welcome. I'm so glad you could come on for a book chat. How you doing?
Do you like my background?
I am crazy about your background. It is tremendous.
Yeah.
I
Happy
think I've
happy
read.
to be here.
I think I've read that book 3 times now and have loved it more each time. But Princess Donut is just very close to my heart. So I love it, tremendous. And man, I am so excited to just chat about our reading journeys because ever since I've been following your channel and we had a book chat for DCC, so we got to gush and dive deep into this inevitable ruin. But I've felt a kindred spirit in you, and a fellow world traveler, and someone whose reading journey also kind of mirrors my own. So I wanted to get into that a little bit and have maybe a discussion I couldn't have with a lot of other people. And I want to start off by describing a little bit of my own reading journey, and I'm curious where you'll find resonances or where yours has kind of diverted from that as well. So I want to set the stage a little bit here.
Sure.
So I grew up just with a lot of different hobbies, but I loved reading series like Goosebumps for fun. And then when Harry Potter came into my life, I was somewhere in the 4th grade, and the first 3 books were out, I think. And I went crazy for those, and then eagerly awaited the release of book 4 and 5, and then it became a world craze. And I was reading Harry Potter fan fiction between the books coming out, and I loved it. And the last book came out when I was just graduated high school, and it seemed like the end of my childhood. But so reading for pleasure, for escape into a heroic kind of situation and world was not unfamiliar to me. But somewhere along the way, I kind of changed my view of what reading was to me. Oh, hi, Derry.
Hi, Derry.
Yeah, we're coming in at a time that's convenient for you over there in New Zealand.
This stream is for one person, and it's Derry. Hi, Derry.
I worry that the way that I experienced fiction and literature, most as a teenager growing up in middle school and high school, kind of turned reading from something I turned to for fun and fulfillment into just an object for study, for analysis, these for increasing my knowledge and for as vessels of theme and symbolism and chance to make arguments over and finding evidence. And so I read mostly, I think, besides Harry Potter, just through school. And no one ever told me to that fantasy couldn't be for adults, or that I couldn't be a serious intellectual if I read fantasy and science fiction. But I just kind of imbibed this as I looked up as I was growing older, top lists of the best literature of all time and the best books. And most of it is tragic realist fiction and a lot of modernist stuff. And so I don't know, as I went through college, I kind of completely left fantasy and science fiction behind. I then sought out these types of deep realist fiction works, and my reading was kind of dying. And I read some great books in that phase, but my reading was slowly dying out as I kind of settled into my adult life and job, and until my friend just forced me to read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And I recaptured that feeling of what it was like reading Goosebumps and Harry Potter as a kid, and it was this missing piece of my life. And I just got so lost in that series and the rest of the Cosmere books that were out, and then jumping around discovering all these modern fantasy books that I had been ignoring for so many years, and sci-fi, the Three Body Problem trilogy, and these books were now getting me so invigorated compared to the books I had been reading, in college and after. And it was a wonderful rediscovering of kind of this youthful thing that I had left behind. And interestingly, I've been basically on a giant binge of fantasy, mostly modern fantasy and sci-fi in the last 7 years since then. But recently, I'm finding my taste shifting and changing, and Um, a lot of the more recent modern fantasy with the more accessible prose just isn't doing it for me. Isn't getting me immersed. I read through Realm of the Elderlings, some Guy Gavriel Kay, and I'm feeling this shift in and Los Master Bujold that I am now. It's harder for me to find that immersion, and maybe it's my just exposure to a bunch of different modern fantasy stories and experiencing a lot of the tropes already that I just am requiring something different now. But I'm just curious hearing that whole journey. If their resonance is there. I know I've heard you talk about you hang on to some of a pretentious reading side and loving reading poetry and things that aren't modern fantasy and sci-fi, and so I think you've held on to some of that that I just kind of completely threw to the side. Maybe I should recapture some of that to have a more balanced reading life. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you make of all that.
I hate reading. I mean, you know what? I'm being a bit tongue in cheek, but at the same time, first of all, wait. Before we talk about me, thank you for having me on, because I didn't say that. Thank you for waking up at flipping 7 in the morning to talk to me. I don't think my wife would do that. And it's lovely to talk to you too, mate. When was our Dungeon Crawler Carl chat with Derry? Hi, Derry.
Oh,
April? April.
No, that was. Oh, well, yeah, it was after the audiobook had come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Derry. Yeah, I get time zones mixed up. Is it really 1:30 a.m. for you? I thought it'd be more similar to David's time zone in Japan.
Well, currently, it's coming up for 10 p.m. here. So if yeah, and Derry, New Zealand will be a few hours further on. So far on that it's often removed from maps. Whenever you look at a map, a really good map will have stuff like Tuvalu and stuff on it, but a good map will have New Zealand on it. And see, once you realize how many maps just don't include New Zealand, I'm sure Derry will back me up on this. When you realize how many maps just don't include New Zealand, it's quite shocking. Like maps just go, yeah, that's enough. Australia, good. Tick, moving on. And I find that wild. But no, I very much enjoyed that Dungeon Crawler Carl chat with you. And Derry, and I'm still wonderful. A huge fan. Yeah. And you know what? Sorry, I will answer your questions in a second. I feel like, right, you can agree with me, or not. I feel like the tide is slightly turning against Dungeon Crawler Carl. Not significantly, but because the series has reached such a height of popularity.
Yeah.
There has begun to be a small contingent of people who've read it, genuinely tried it, and gone, I don't get it. Which is fine. You don't have to like Dungeon Crawler Carl. You can hate Dungeon Crawler Carl. But I think those people are beginning to form a quite significant contingent. Contingent, again, maybe is too negatively loaded. Like, again, like what you like and don't like what you don't like. But it's made me reflect. When I go back to Dungeon Crawler Carl, I'm like, was I wrong? Did I just kind of board a hype train and choo my way into it? I don't think so. I really, especially this Inevitable Ruin, and Bedlam Bride to some extent, but especially this Inevitable Ruin, I think people talk about it as maybe going a bit too overboard and a bit too madcap and a bit too crazy and going a bit far from its roots. And I just disagree. And I was so glad to have this be part of the fan base that you and Derry were the first people I spoke about Dungeon Crawler Carl with. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for Parade of Horribles. And I'm also excited for Operation Bounce House, though I feel like I'm the only person in the world who requested an arc and didn't get it. But that's another issue. I think it's because I trashed.
Well, I'm waiting on the audio. I'm waiting on the audio for that anyway, because I just have too great a time with Jeff Hayes and Matt.
Is it Jeff?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But Jeff Hayes couldn't save Kaiju.
No. That was like the rehearsal for DCC for both of them. I think, Jeff Hayes didn't give as lively or emotive as a performance, but I don't think the book itself lent itself to that anyway. But that was the training ground. That was the necessary training ground where Din was working out this kind of proto version of Carl and create so he could create a more compelling one immediately in book one, because he'd already worked out this less compelling version and of the less compelling animal companions. And even just like I've tried a bunch of other lit RPGs set in an actual virtual reality video game, and that whole setting just doesn't work as well, I think, as the kind of DCC version of it all being our reality that it's kind of been imposed upon us by aliens. But I know it's zany, but somehow the DCC setup just it leads to needing less suspension of disbelief and just higher stakes, more immersion for me. than if we were in an actual video game. But
But you don't have to
Yeah,
publish your training ground. The training ground can stay behind closed doors.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing, like, I think that is quite a popular niche, the actual, like, lit RPG within these video game realms, like, that seems to be what lit RPG really was.
Mm.
And, you know, he was, I know, becoming a fan of that, and so, you know, throwing his hat in the ring, writing one of those, and then he went his own way, thankfully.
So I'm going back to Scotland next month for a week for family reasons. And annoyingly, frustratingly, Matt Dinniman is also going to be in Scotland. He's going to be there 5 days before I get there. And so my brother and my sister and a few of my friends and a few of my cousins, all of whom I got into Dungeon Crawler Carl. I was the evangelist. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're all going to see Dungeon Crawler. They're all going to see Matt Dinniman without me. And not only that, my sister is like, "What book do you want me to get signed for you?" And I'm like, "Well, that's lovely, thank you, Katrina." And I'm like, "Can you please get Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon signed? Because I hate that book, and I would love a signature on a copy of Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon saying, 'Dear David, I know you can't stand this. Have another copy.'"
Oh no!
And the thing is, I know Matt Dinniman would find that hilarious. I think he'd find that really funny.
Yeah.
But my sister's like, "I refuse to do that for you. I will not do it." So she's going to get flipping Bedlam Bride signed for me, or she's going to get, you know, whichever, this inevitable ruin. And I will be very grateful. But I would love a signed copy of a book I despise, because I know that the author would actually genuinely enjoy that. So
yeah, he has a great sense of humor, and I know that this has been wild for him, just, you know, becoming a public figure and the book's blowing up. I was at Dragonsteel a couple years ago, and I didn't expect a huge amount of DCC fans at the Brandon Sanderson convention. But there was a huge line the whole time when he was signing, waiting. So I waited probably 45 minutes in line, and that was actually a blast because we could chat, just all gushing DCC stuff, and I just did not expect to find that at the Sando convention. But he was delightful when I met him briefly for the signing, and so he was great. But
talk to me. Sorry, I know you asked me a question that I have merrily skipped past. But talk to me about Dragonsteel, because I'm so fascinated by, like, it feel like I was trying to explain to my wife what it's like being able to talk to authors a little bit and interact with people you've been watching on YouTube, and your brain has to kind of skip past it when you first get into BookTube, that this is just something, you know, to get used to. All these people you admire to various extents suddenly become someone you can interact with, and you know, the stuff to negotiate there. But I think I'm pretty good at that. But my brain would short circuit somewhere like Dragonsteel, being able to just walk past booth and seeing person A, B, C, D, E, who might not be world famous, except for maybe Sanderson himself, but very much I view of as famous. So what's Dragonsteel like when you go?
Yeah, that was wild, because I've had very few experiences like that. That was my first ever convention of any kind, first ever book convention. Since, you know, the last 8 years of my life or so, like, I've just been obsessed with this and living this world, just and in the online community of it. And so these are like my rock stars right now, like, you know, Sanderson, Robin Hobb, Matt Dinniman, Christopher Rocchio. And so it was truly wild that first day of the convention, when I was let loose in the you know, the showcase room area, and I have my books that I had brought from home to get signed, and I'm racing around, and there's Michael Sullivan and Robin Hobb. Like, one of the first series I read when I came back to fantasy was the Rayur Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. And recently I had just finished The Realm of the Elderlings, and had for many, many hours these extremely intense, emotional, personal experiences where Robin Hobb was communicating directly to me. And then to be able to meet her and she was so gracious. She was like just almost like an alien creature, like, in how noble and graceful she was. Like, she didn't almost seem real to me, and she was so friendly and nice. And I was just telling her how much the series meant to me, and I had brought my mass market paperbacks of Assassin's Apprentice and the Assassin's Fate, the last one, the bookends of the series, for her to sign for me. And she was just so lovely. But it was almost an out of body experience to be there with her. And then but the weird thing was, though, to be able to walk around, and there's Rocchio, and there's Dinniman, there's Fonda Lee, like, at Dragonsteel, it had become a popular and well-known convention by this time 2 years ago, and so a lot of these big name authors in our space went to that, and it was just wild because those are some of the authors of my favorite series, and it was truly wild. Just it was exhilarating. I had a blast just getting books signed, meeting these authors for a couple moments, be able to just say how much the books meant. Like I was able to say to Fonda Lee, like I brought Jade War book 2, and I was like, oh, this is
The
my
best one.
favorite of the trilogy. It's it's maybe not everyone's favorite, but it's my favorite. And she was like, oh, mine too. Like,
is it really? Is it really? Is Jade War really her favorite?
That's what she said. That's what she said. But it seemed
I feel so vindicated.
It was fun to be able to have real little moments like of that of connection. Even if they'll never remember me, it was really cool. I loved it. I also loved seeing booktube friends that I'd only seen on screen before, and be able to have fun and go to panels about book topics, and just be in a giant space where almost everyone was book mad and just there for their love of story and fantasy in particular. Like it just felt like you could geek out as much as you ever wanted to, and not only would you not be judged for it, but you'd be embraced. And so it was a blast. Like the few days there were a memorable experience, like easily some of the best days of my life, like just a purely positive experience. So the thing was that's my first convention experience. Like I feel like it was so great that going to future conventions could only be a letdown after that. So yeah, that was
until we meet at a convention, and then it's the best convention you've ever been to.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what I do. I think the word rock stars is absolutely right. I think as much as I do think I have a handle on it, especially now a year later into my channel, yeah, having them all in one big room, and they're human beings. I don't want to be like, and I can approach and talk to any of them, because I mean, probably most of them wouldn't want to talk to me, but just that weird sort of interaction times 50 over and over and over again is something to get used to, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And I met Sando very briefly in one of his lightning sightings where there's like hundreds of people standing with their books open, and he's going down the line. But he doesn't just sign. Like he'll pause for a moment, and you can chat with him for a few seconds. And so I was able to tell him how Mistborn got me back into reading fantasy and science fiction as an adult. And it was just so nice to be able to communicate that to authors. And I think it also feels like hearing that from fans really is the lifeblood of an artist and an author. So it's nice to be able to have that back and forth.
How are you feeling about the adaptations that have just been announced for Brando Sando?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I've always thought Mistborn could make a great film and theater experience. I'd love for more people to be able to experience that story who wouldn't read it or who might get into the books because of that. I'm not. I used to be, when I was in high school and college. I was pretty movie obsessed, and I thought I might want to study that. And I was just watching films all the time from all around the world and all different historical periods. But I've become much less obsessed with visual media over the last bunch of years, and so I don't really need it myself because I'm such a visual reader, and Mistborn lives in my head very visually anyway. And so it's fun. I won't mind the adaptation, and even if it's not a big hit, like I'll always have the book. So I'm not gonna go crazy for it either way. But I will be happy if it is a success and brings people in who just wouldn't be experiencing this very new fantasy story. Because I guess I'm a little disappointed in general that I'm not a big superhero guy, not really into the Marvel films, and most people's experience with big, large-scale, heroic, epic fantasy over the last 20 years is really through Marvel movies, and I just think they're really lackluster experiences in a lot of ways, in terms of the plotting, the theming, the character building, and I feel like Sando and a lot of other fantasy authors who haven't reached the masses can offer a lot more story for people, and so I'm excited. I guess.
I hope it's done well. I mean, it can't be worse than the Dark Tower adaptation, so there's always that safety there. But I think there's a really interesting possibility here, even though personally, Sanderson's work, I don't say appeals less and less to me, but I think Wind and Truth for me was a big old flop, and that's fine. I think Sanderson acknowledged basically that it was going to not hit for a lot of people. And there are some Sanderson books that I think are better than others. I mean, I know you're talking about Mistborn positively, but man, Well of Ascension, no, not a fan of Well of Ascension. I much prefer Wax and Wayne to the original Mistborn trilogy. That's my hot take. Much prefer Wax and Wayne. But there are so many, and I think just as we're talking about maybe there being a slight contingent turning against Dungeon Crawler Carl, there's definitely the same thing with Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah,
as people's tastes change and develop. But at the same time, Sanderson has so many good possibilities for visual media. Like the first Mistborn book, you're absolutely right, would be brilliant on the screen. It's so visual, that book, and Wax and Wayne too. And I will get through Well of Ascension if it means that I can watch Wax and Wayne on screen. There's what else is there? You know what? I'm not a huge fan of Tress, but like the whole concept of Tress and the again the purely visual, creatively interesting elements of Tress, which is the world building for me. The almost kooky but like loving it elements of Tress could make a wonderful movie. So I wasn't expecting it. It kind of blindsided me. I kind of felt like Sando's adaptation stuff was just going to churn forever in the background. And now that it's happening, I'm actually enthused, really enthused, and excited. So, Derry, nothing can be worse than the Dark Tower. Nothing can be worse than the Dark Tower movie. Nothing.
I also love that Sando's going to be heavily involved with it, which is rare. And so I love the idea that I'm going to get to experience a different version of Stormlight or Mistborn that he actually, the original artist, has a hand in. And so it's I think it's gonna be just really interesting to see those changes on a more just intellectual level. I was really fascinated by that recently when I watched the Long Walk film. And by the way, if you have not read the, have you seen that? Have you seen that?
Yes. Well, I've not watched the movie, but I've seen enough clips that I know what you're like, that they make significant changes.
So, it was really fascinating to watch the film and try to remember back to what they had changed. And I'd only read it a year ago, so I was able to do that. But then I read it immediately after and saw like line for line, like what they changed and what they kept. And that was a really fascinating experience to do that. But I loved both in that case. And I think it'll be similarly cool to just see how they adapt it. But the like seeing Luthadel and the Mistborn setting on screen, and I just think it will be really cool. And man, I just think it's so easy though for modern fantasy films and TV shows to become cheesy. Like the visuals need to be right, the acting, like it can so easily veer towards campiness and cheesiness. And I think it'll be such a hard needle to thread to be able to do this story, and for it to, with all of its kind of earnest emotional core, and to not be cheesy. I have also just like extremely high standards for like almost all American made TV, and most films to me are just too cheesy. Like the acting is too over the top, too unnatural. Like I've become just a complete snob with TV and film. So I'm a bit worried, but given how, you know, some people love the Marvel films, and they don't hold back on the campiness, so maybe it won't be too much of a problem for the larger audience.
I struggle with anime. I really struggle with anime, and I have a very particular reason that I struggle with anime. You have the most beautiful art, the most interesting story, but the fact that whenever someone gets some kind of emotional reaction, we linger on that emotional reaction for about 20 seconds. The 20-second intake of breath, and then you see that intake of breath from like 3 or 4 different points of views, and then it's repeated like 3 or 4 times. I'm like, yeah, we get it. And I can say this. I live in Japan and I love Japanese culture. I give myself the ability to say this, but anime needs to flip and speed up sometimes. I think this is pretty heresy to a lot of people. If there's any media that deserves 2 times speeding, it's not audiobooks, it's anime. And I find myself far more drawn to manga than anime for that reason, because when you do have these moments of like severe emotional weight that the author feels like they have to spend like 30 pages on, I just skim it. It's fine. I'll happily admit skimming these pages, and I say that without guilt or or shame.
Yeah, you want to hear arguments from me? I tried different anime and can't get into it, but after I read Shogun and loved it, and saw the recent TV series and loved it, I was just really into that time period, and I went and got the first omnibus volume of Vagabond,
Nice.
and I couldn't get very far into it. Like I'm never been really a graphic novel or comics reader. I enjoyed The Watchmen back when I was in high school, but I don't know. I couldn't get immersed. It felt, and maybe the English translation of the dialogue is also not helping, but it felt too. Yeah, it wasn't as gritty or as believable for me. Like it felt like a lot of the dialogue was, modern sounding and over the top, and just I don't know. It was just everything that was happening was a little too cheesy for me. I couldn't get immersed. I couldn't fall into it like I can with reading novels, and even then, it's a struggle sometimes to get immersed.
I struggle with screens. See, if you built me my dream house, which first of all in Japan would have more than flipping 4 rooms as this one does. The next thing I'd love to have like a library of like manga that could just be like like wall to wall to wall, all the manga I could ever read. If you could give me that, and I could take the next volume down from the shelf and be able to read it physically and without spending flipping thousands upon thousands of dollars, because these things cost the same as regular books, depending on where you're getting them from.
Hey,
hi Evie. Yes, Evie. I think I'm going to read the book that I'm always apparently mispronouncing. Spear that cuts through water. The spear that cuts water. I'm reading that book next month. I think, Evie. Don't hold me to that, but yeah, I think so. So I'm excited for that. If I could read manga that way, I absolutely would. But because really the only alternative is screen or spend all the money you own. It's not something I've delved into as much as I would like to. I'm quite selective.
Yeah. Are there ways? I'd imagine it wouldn't even be for the English translations, but are there like libraries there that you can read manga for free or take out?
Yeah, but my Japanese isn't up to snuff for it would be study rather than enjoyment. Evie's gonna hold me to that, right? Okay, in that case, I'll do it. Evie, I've got a plane back to Scotland next month for a week, so maybe that'll be the time. Don't hold me to that, but March. Yeah, so it's just a thing, and I'm finding this more and more as I get older. I just like paper. As everyone else seems to be going towards digital, I prefer paper.
I'm with you. Whenever I try to read like an arc that I've gotten on my Kindle, or if I'm out and about and I can pull up my phone and my Kindle app on my phone, it never goes well for me reading off my phone, or even just when I read on Kindle, it's not as satisfying as having the book and being able to hold those pages, turn the pages, hold and look at the cover. And I like also tracking my physical progress through the book and putting the bookmark in. Like, yeah, there's so much involved in that's kinesthetic. I also like reading immersively, where I'm holding the book and listening and reading, and then listening to the audio at the same time. Like that kind of helps me tune out the world around me to the greatest extent, and just like focus in on the story and get lost in it.
I'll take you further. I find myself, and I've spoken about this previously, I find myself enjoying a book less, not just in terms of the experience, but I will rate a book lower. If I had to give a book a star rating, I find that generally, if I'm reading it on my phone or on a screen, what have you, there will be 1-star rating lower generally.
Yeah.
I tend to be more generous towards books that I've had a better experience, like better tactile, as you say, kinesthetic experience with. So yeah. Are you okay with that sunlight? I'm seeing it rise to the east.
Yeah, the dawn. I just am reading The Two Towers, and so there was the dramatic sunrise that happens after the Battle of Helm's Deep. That's right. I'm usually not in here right at the dawn time, but I don't have blinds or shades on this window here, so it's good. I don't mind the sun. It's good to get some morning sunlight, and it's
I
so
avoid
cold
it whenever
here.
possible.
So
I recorded a video with Joanna the other night that I haven't posted yet, and I'm looking at the picture of myself. I'm like, I look like an absolute goblin, And I'm editing this thing, like I don't even want to look at myself. But I think with me, because I'm recording these discussions late at night, there is no natural sunlight, which I think is why when I record videos, I tend to just go out into the woods and record to kind of counterbalance that.
Your video settings are just incredible. Like they make me feel transported and cozy, and which I love, because there's where I live, it's okay. It's there's some woods around here, but it's not filled with kind of natural beauty. So I love seeing those settings, and just imagining I'm there with you in Japan for a few minutes.
When Dragonsteel happens in Tokyo, we will we will reconvene and I'll show you some settings. Evie, it's even worse than that because about 27 minutes ago, forgive me, Ben asked me a question about my reading life, and I haven't even addressed that.
It's
So
okay. We'll come back to
way
it.
behind
I
schedule.
love rambling. I love rambling. But I'm towards the end of The Curse of Chalion, which is my first ever Lowest Master Bujold fantasy, and it's going really well. It was a little bit rocky for me just getting into a completely different Bujold writing mode after being obsessed with her Vorkoskin books for the last year and a half. But towards the end now, I'm so invested in everything. So I'm reading that, and also slowly making my way through Lord of the Rings with Andy Serkis audio, reading it in print to go along with that, and that's going wonderfully. It's the right time for me with that story. So that's what I've been reading. I'm near the end of The Two Towers.
Andy Serkis is he's a legend. He deserves everything coming to him. Everything positive coming to him, he deserves. Yeah.
He's tremendous.
So for me, I just finished Discovery by the Mintons. I'm now currently reading two things. I'm reading Ducal Heir by Marie M. Mullaney, which is a self-pub novel. I'm looking at it. It's right over there. I started it just before I went on vacation. And you know that thing of you don't want to take a book that you're halfway through on vacation, and then when you come back, you've sort of started something else. So that's my priority to finish in the next week or two. I'm also reading The Hydrogen Sonata by Ian M. Banks, which is the last culture novel. And I literally have had it on a shelf for years, and I've never wanted to start it because he's dead, Ian M. Banks. Which I don't want to make his defining feature. But yeah, it's 10 p.m. here, Josh.
I've been amassing all the culture books from used bookstores over the years. I think I've just about got all of them. Would you say it's okay to start with Consider Phlebas?
I love Consider Phlebas. I think it's a wonderful novel, and so many people think it's lackluster. It's very episodic, and it's a bit cheesy and all over the place, and it's completely fertile imagination. I actually have a signed Ian M. Banks copy, talking about signed copies earlier. I just found it in a charity shop in Scotland way after Ian M. Banks had died, and it just says, "To Eddie from Ian." And I'm like, you know what? My name isn't Eddie, but I'm not letting this one go, and I still have that upstairs. I'm also reading.
Hey, Josh.
So yeah, I'm reading The Hydrogen Sonata. I'm really liking it.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait to get into some more hard sci-fi. Like that's something I've been wanting to try in terms of Banks and Reynolds and Peter F. Hamilton. I've a lot of kind of big authors, British authors that I want to try. I've read. He's already one of my favorite authors, and so I love so many of his fantasy and science fiction books. Man, Children of Time, just one of my favorite sci-fis, and I mean Shadows of the Apt. That's his 10-book fantasy series that he started off with. I just love. Got that whole set right there.
I read Children of Earth like 4 years ago, and I always meant to get to book 2 and never did. And I kind of feel like my Tchaikovsky enthusiasm accidentally waned. So I do want to give him another shot. But I go into a bookshop and I just see like a wall of Tchaikovsky, and I have no indication on where to start. What's good, what's bad, what interconnects with another series, and I just kind of sigh and I just buy another Dresden book instead.
No, author like Tchaikovsky is tough because he has all different types of stuff, whether it's standalones or kind of interconnected standalones, and then he has more traditional series that are kind of just one big story in multiple volumes. But I mean, for you, a very simple answer: if you've already started Children of Time series, like go for Children of Ruin when you want to get back into that.
Do I need to remember Children of Earth particularly?
Children of Time? No. That series is more like interconnected standalones with big time jumps. There will be a few characters that cross over into every book, but the characters arcs are not like the biggest, not really any big aspect of that series. So those are pretty well self-contained stories, each one.
Okay.
So you actually don't need to remember anything about Children of Time to enjoy Children of Ruin. There's a very different kind of animal uplifting situation in Children of Ruin that I really loved exploring. And then I would say for Tchaikovsky, if you find Dogs of War anywhere, like you cannot go wrong. That is a first book in a series of 3 books that are kind of interconnected standalones. You could just do Dogs of War and be good with that. That tells a self-contained story. But I think that's one of his best. And if you see the novellas also, like Ogres, just a tremendous standalone novella. Elder Race I really liked as a kind of 200-pager. But Dogs of War, simple answer for you. I wish I had read all of the stuff so I know lots of people have loved Guns of the Dawn. I have not read that one
That's
yet.
what Evie's saying, I think, in the comments.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that book title? Is it Children of Earth or Children of Time, the first one?
Children of Time is the.
Oh, see,
the
so I don't
first
even
one.
remember the title of the book. This is how far away it was.
Yeah, Children
It
of
was
Time,
Christmas
Ruin,
2021. It
Memory,
wasn't that far away.
and Strife, which is book 4, is coming out this year.
Oh,
and yeah, I have not.
completed as a trilogy, no?
I've not read. No, he loves to leave his stuff open ended. So like there are certain series which are more traditional series for him, like the Final Architecture sci-fi books. Like that's a trilogy. That is one story. There's the Tyrant Philosophers, which Evie's talking about here, with City of Last Chances is book 1. I think he's finishing that up this year with book 4, and there's a couple novellas in there. But like those are going to be open and closed series. But then he likes leaving some open-ended stuff, like the Children of Time books and the Dogs of War books, where he's just coming back to those when he feels like he has another story to tell, and he could do a time jump or change locations and tell a story with that world building he's already used. And so those are these weird kind of interconnected standalones that I don't think he's ever gonna kind of put the final end on.
Great
really
beard,
no need
too,
to.
Tchaikovsky. Got the
Oh, and
proper-
eyebrows, yeah. Yeah.
I've got the eyebrows, but I don't have the beard. I'm incapable. My wife looks at my hairline going back here, and she's like, "Listen, here's the thing: if you can't grow a beard or mustache, like we have to hold on to this hair for as long as possible." And I'm like, "Okay, can do." But yeah, I always see him, and I see, you know what it's like where you feel like an author is going to be for you, but you haven't really properly delved into their stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an author like that for you, who you feel that way about. But for me, that's Tchaikovsky. I know I will like him when I get to him. I just haven't properly taken a jump in the pool.
Yeah, it's tough with an author like that who's just so prolific.
Do you want to hear about my my reading journey? Because it's now been 34 minutes since you asked me that question.
I do. For
And
people that came on, I was curious to hear if David kind of, where he resonated with my own reading journey of kind of loving fantasy as a kid growing up, but then kind of moving away from it as I went through school, and my reading veered more towards heavy tragic literary classics and realist fiction, and only rediscovered fantasy and sci-fi later, a bunch of years back, and I'm curious just to hear about David's own reading journey.
So I think if I had to, and maybe I'll come back on this later, but I feel like my love of reading isn't so much a love of reading as reading is the best fit for me to experience adventure. Because when I think about what I liked as a young person and as a teenager, Darius says my eyebrows are inadequate. I have like a little third eyebrow here, Darius. Don't know if you've ever noticed. See that little one, this little island just off on its own. Some people talk about monobrows, but I have a tribrow, which I'm very proud of. Listen, when I grew up, it wasn't particularly books, although I did like to read books. It was video games, and it was a very particular type of video games. I loved video games that were open world to some extent. So we're talking even stuff like Jak and Daxter. I don't know if you ever played the Jak and Daxter games.
No, I grew up with Nintendo stuff like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Super Mario 64.
Yeah, and I loved games where you could literally just go in any direction. And so the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion came out when I was like 11 or 12, and that blew my flipping socks off. Because if you don't know about the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the premise is you walk outside of the tutorial, and then you can just walk in any direction and do whatever you like in whatever order, and you can make your own stories up and just kind of experience fun. Or you can go on like a quest, but you're almost incentivized not to go on a quest, or you can just flip in, find as many watermelons as you like and pile them in a big old pile. And like the creativity there was through a sense of freedom. And similarly, a game I still play to this day is RuneScape. And I should have left RuneScape behind when I was 9. But here I am, like 23 years later, playing this really silly, grindy RPG that looks ancient. It's so old. But I still play RuneScape for 2 reasons. First of all, it's my audiobook thing, because it's very easy to listen to a book and keep track of the book while playing this game, because it's leveling up of stats and things like that. It's quite inane. But also RuneScape has a similar thing where you just walk in any direction and you just do whatever you like. And so I really like the idea of journey and freedom. And this also dovetails into the passion that I discovered when I was I think I was about 19. Because I really, this is a mutual passion we both share, is travel and exploring the world. Of course, now I have the lovely ability to buy 4 plane tickets at once, which somewhat deteriorates the wallet. But one thing I really like to do is just, especially when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I was very much fortunate to do. Like, I understand there's a lot of privilege here. Just to travel. Like, I moved to Japan when I was 21. I moved to the States when I was 19. When I was 24, I did a circumnavigation of the world with my wife over like 6 months. We did the Trans-Siberian, and then, did a complete circle of the world over like 6-7 months. And I understand how fortunate I was to be able to do that. And then also the Middle East, lived in the Middle East, got to go to places like Azerbaijan, Georgia, Sri Lanka. And I've now been to about 60 plus countries. Which again smacks of a heady amount of privilege. Don't get me wrong, but I think the through line between my love of video games and my love of travel is just being able to explore new places, as much as I am able. And I think that's also why I liked reading as a kid, very much as teenagers do. Stopped reading, and then when I was about 19, I picked it up again. And I was an idiot, mate. I didn't realize that adult fantasy existed. I didn't understand. I thought like it stopped when you're like 10. And that's when the sword stopped. Yeah. And it sounds like you had a slightly similar experience, that you didn't even know this existed. And so I got to 18, I want to say 17 or 18, and I was working in a coffee shop to kind of help with the university expenses. And my boss, Debbie, she turns to me and she's like, what are you reading? And I think I said something like utterly pretentious and makes me cringe. I'm like, I'm reading Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Just go slap yourself. Do you know what I mean? But she was like, have you heard of The Dark Tower? And I'm like, no. And she's like, you should. And so I do. I go the next day, I just go out and buy a copy of The Gunslinger. And loved it, didn't like it. Because now I love The Gunslinger, but when I first read it, it was, a lot of people have that same experience. Then I read The Drawing of the Three, and I'm like, this is bananas in the best way. And I understand that The Drawing of the Three has a lot of critiques, especially as the years pass from it, but I still love that book. So I finished The Dark Tower, Song of Ice and Fire, and then, Song of Ice and Fire being where it is, i.e. nowhere, I bought Malazan Book of the Fallen. And Malazan Book of the Fallen continues to be, for me, the best series I've ever read. And even when I read something by Erikson that I don't think is quite up to his par, I mean, I read a few of his short novellas that were not Malazan related last month and didn't have a great time with them. I still think Malazan Book of the Fallen is one of the best things ever written. And then maybe that goes back to the pretentiousness that you were speaking of earlier. That part of me who still says, I'm reading Bleak House, quite finds his footing with Malazan. But I think for me, what I'm trying to say is the reason I like reading is the reason I like travel, and it's the reason I like video games. It's the idea of just a certain kind of escapism, and it's escapism that feels free and liberating. And that has stayed with me all the way up until today. So yeah, I remember once I went on when I was in high school, we I'll stop you chattering away with this story. But I remember very much that we were.
I love it. Go on.
We did one international trip when I was in school, or maybe two. I was a member of the senior concert band, so I played the flute terribly. But the reason I hated playing the flute, I was awful at it. I've got kind of thick, chunky lips, and that doesn't really suit itself for a flute. I should have played the saxophone or something. But I kept on playing the flute for this band because I'm like, apparently, when you get to your third year of school, you're eligible to go on one of these international school trips. And so I'm like, listen, I'm just going to play the flute so I can go to, and I think it was the Netherlands, it was Holland. I just want to go to Holland. So I keep playing in this band every Friday, flipping Friday after school. The last thing I got to do is go back into school and play the flute for 2 hours, but I did it. So, and then eventually like 3-4 years pass, which is an eternity when you're a child, let alone when you're an adult. And I get eligible for this flight, this week-long trip to the Netherlands. I'm like, yes, it's time. And so we get on I think it was a bus and a boat, because from Scotland to the Netherlands, it's probably like not that far from jumping state lines, depending on what state you're in. I mean, you're probably talking about similar distances. But we get to the Netherlands, and genuinely, it was one of these school trips where it's like, wake up in the hotel, get on the bus, get on the bandstand in this park, play the flute for 2 hours, get back on the bus, go to the next bandstand. And the whole thing was just musical performance. Of course it was, because it was a band trip.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at a street. I remember this so clearly, being like 14 years old at this point, looking at a street, this random Dutch street. just off from the bandstand, and being like, I would love just to walk down that street and see what the next street looked like, and see what the next street looked like after that, and just go for a big aimless wander. And I felt so upset that the trip was not what I thought it would be, and that I was stuck in this one spot. And so I kind of made a decision at that time, like whenever I can, I'm gonna go down streets like that. It's something I try and do with my kids as well. And even though travel is more difficult these days, with the yen being cheap and having a family and just life being what it is, and XYZ, it's still something I try to emulate with my kids, both in reading and just in general as a life philosophy. And it's another reason I feel so grateful to live in Tokyo, because Tokyo is the city of wee random side streets with a million little adventures. So yeah, that was a very circumambulatory answer to your original question. And I think I've been chatting for about 7 minutes, but there we go.
It was wonderful. It's so fascinating how connected, when you really think about it, those two things would be, like physical travel to new places and escaping into a different time and place in a book. And it resonates so much with me, because I didn't get to do so much travel growing up, but I had the privilege during college of studying abroad in Greece for a few months, and that, even though it was still kind of within a recognizably Western cultural context, it completely it gave me that travel bug. It just, the level of adventure and freedom of being in such a different place and exploring ancient ruins all over the country. It opened up something in me, and then I sought out just teaching after I graduated from college in different places in the Pacific, on a very remote atoll in the Marshall Islands, and that was just a mind-opening experience. And then I'm teaching English in Vietnam for a couple of years, and I think and I've traveled as a tourist too in a lot of places, and it just doesn't feel the same to me as when you are living long term in a different country, and especially to be growing up in a Western country and then kind of living within a completely different non-Western culture and place. It really did something to me. It kind of just unmoored me from my reality and previous existence, I think, and just opened me up to just wider perspectives and in a really beautiful and profound way. And I think if people are lucky enough to have those experiences, I would say to chase them. But if you can't, then doing it through literature and books does seem like that window into that same kind of experience for anyone, wherever you are. And it's such a beautiful way to live within others' minds and go to different places, whether they're real or imagined. And in a lot of ways, I think that distinction doesn't really matter. Yeah,
it's not even the I would take you a step further. I don't even think it's like realizing that there are other perspectives, but it's also the decentering of your own perspective. That the way that you see the world and the way that you do things isn't the protagonist. It's not the main character. You are not the main character. Your perspective is just one among many, and all of them are to an extent equally valid and worthwhile doing things. So yeah. I find it a really interesting conversation. I do think there's probably an overlap between people who like to visit new places and people who like to read fantasy and sci-fi. There was a few comments that we were neglecting. I want to make sure people are heard.
Oh yeah, let's
see.
Okay. We have Mac in the house. Hey Mac.
Leaves the best comments.
Malazan and the First Law trilogy as audio. Oh, that's interesting. That's First Law. Yeah, I haven't heard the Tuna Heba loving Malazan audio experience, but I actually did. I thought Ralph Lister for the first two books was incredible, and Michael Page picked up in a great way. I'll say after
Erickson really doesn't like them. Well, that's not fair. I think he has issues with the audiobooks. It's the better way of putting it.
Yeah, and Evie was excited about you playing the flute.
Sorry, Evie.
Chadia read Rejoice, one of Erickson's sci-fi books. Malazan is 1,000 times better. Yeah, I had a really interesting time with Malazan overall. I had such a transcendent experience with the Bone Hunters. Like that felt like such a beautiful culmination of everything, and to have that intensive an experience, that was just the peak of everything that Malazan could be for me. And then for me not to love as much the later books, yeah, that was an interesting kind of roller coaster for me. Escapism that becomes exploratory. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Is it Mark Lawrence? I remember reading, the blurb or the spine or the dust jacket of one of Mark Lawrence's, and he talks about his daughter, the fact that his daughter it requires a lot of hospitalization and treatment. I think I don't want to get this wrong, but basically he can't go very far from his house, and so writing books is also a form of escapism, and going to other places, even though you're quite got to be careful with your geographical locale. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I believe that's definitely the case. I've seen that on his blogs.
Yeah.
And Evie says, that's why I try to read translated literature, regardless of genre or literary, getting out of the US-centric, Western-centric mindset of storytelling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been neglecting non-Western literature the last bunch of years as I've kind of tried to catch up on all of this fantasy and sci-fi that I've been missing out on. Like I felt like when I discovered adult fantasy existed and that it could be really for me, I felt this giant FOMO that I'd been missing out for all these years since I'd finished Harry Potter, that I have to catch up on all this stuff that I missed. And I think I'm there to that point where I've done a lot of the big ones in the genre, and now can try to branch out, maybe go back to more diverse reading than it's been only fantasy and sci-fi with a little historical fiction thrown in. But I know
I have a tangential rant if you want to hear it.
Yeah, go for it.
It's nothing to do with Evie. It's a sidebar to Evie's comment. It's not about what Evie said whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But this I'm seeing a few YouTube videos. Right, I try not to make BookTube videos, like the state of BookTube. I try not to do that, but I'm gonna use other people's channels as an opportunity to rant about this kind of thing. So here you go. I see a lot of videos over and over again about why do BookTubers always read the same stuff. I'm sure you've seen something to that effect. Yeah. It winds me up. Because of course we do. Because see, flippin' Song of Ice and Fire, 1.3 million words long. That is, for a relatively speedy reader, a month's long project, right? We're talking about the Greenbones saga earlier. Yeah. Wonderful series, wonderful trilogy. Yeah, you can do the novellas too, or the novella and the short stories. That will take a normal person 2 or 3 months. And so when it's like, why is everyone's top 10s the same? Because to read 10 fantasy sci-fi series takes bloody years. Like to read Malazan take me a full year. To read Brandon Sanderson stuff will take you years. So of course we're drawing from the same well. And of course there's a thing where we should be dipping into maybe more obscure authors or try and find our own niche. But when you have limited time and your friends are telling you this is good, of course you're going to go after that same stuff. And I think
of course
I've seen that video a few different times, and it always winds me up.
Oh, it does to me too. And people make BookTube channels and are starting to make these lists when they're pretty new into diving into all of this, when their enthusiasm is at its high peak, and so it I used the Reddit fantasy top lists and looked at people that were popular on BookTube like Daniel Green and Mike's Book Reviews, and that's how I tried to figure out, okay, what are people loving in modern fantasy? Because I was so out of the know with this genre, and so I tried to figure out like, okay, what's broadly popular? I want to know what people are reading, and I didn't just want to read obscure things. And I also, with my limited reading time, want to have some way of vetting what I was reading, and those top lists, and they were really helpful. I read a lot of the Reddit top lists from a bunch of years ago, and a lot of those were big hits for me. And then they weren't always, and I'd followed Daniel Green's top list, and I realized, okay, just because he hit with me with First Law doesn't mean I shared his full taste, and then reading the popular trilogy and realized, okay, we diverge. I'm not loving Mark Lawrence and Book of the Ancestor, and then as I read more, I can distinguish my own personal taste within this genre, and then branch out and eventually discover less popular stuff like the Vorkoskin saga, which is just speaks to me so personally and profoundly, but that's not what people. It's a big series that when they first get into modern fantasy and sci-fi, they're going to be finding that and wanting to dive into a 20-book series like that if not many people are talking about it. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. That recent kind of BookTube stuff going around about that made no sense to me, why it was a negative thing to be complaining about.
we'd all love to be the person who is, and I take my hat off to for example, the judges of SPFBO, who are, you know, reading a lot of stuff to find the best and then offer the best up to the rest of us. But when we have limited time and we have limited finances, I cannot be the guy who is, you know, like opening up the trunk and taking everything out just to find the golden nugget, because for every golden nugget you're going to have 3 or 4 less shiny nuggets that you know you're not going to enjoy. And again, when resources are limited for each of us in our personal lives, it makes sense to go for the stuff that we know is good. Yeah. So
And then
anyway,
you find you know, fellow readers who maybe share your taste to an even greater degree, and
yes,
and discover their personal gems and nuggets, and get recommendations. And I had a TBR competition on my channel a couple years ago where my buddies, Read by Kyle and Jake Bishop, gave me books, and it was Jake Bishop that gave me Shards of Honor that started me on my Vorkosigan journey. And it was, I mean, him that got me into GGK as well, and he's become my favorite author. And they gave me Brightness Long Go and Lines of Alrasan to read, and Song for a Bone is my favorite book now, and so it's wonderful to be able to, you know, get those really customized personal recommendations from people that, you know, you're friends with, or that they understand your reading taste a little bit. And part of that is you have to dive into the pool and explore and swim around and find ones that don't work for you and figure out what is. And I think it makes sense to be doing that with a lot of the more popular stuff. And it just makes it hard when your own personal favorites like Dungeon Crawler Carl, it breaks out, and then you're seeing people not as in love with it as you, and you know, it hurts a little bit. Like the same thing has happened with Sun Eater. I got in on that you know, a few books in when it was very small, and it's just this little niche of people who are obsessed with this small thing, and then it breaks out, and you know, then it's finding people that are not going to love it at all, or not going to love it as much. And it's just, I think part of being a big fan is dealing with that. Oh, go for it.
no, I'm the person who doesn't love Sun Eater. I've only read book 1.
Yeah.
And book 2 is the other book that I want on my March TBR. It's Jimenez, and I'm thinking finally The Devils. But yeah, like I want to be on that. I've said this previously, so I won't belabor the point. I feel like I'm always saying this. I would love to be in the Sun Eater fandom. When I see it, same with Wheel of Time. See, when you have these, like we're talking about Daniel Green, like, see these ultra Wheel of Time fans. I would love to be one of them, because it looks like so much fun. And then I crack open the book, and I'm like, this, and yeah, it just goes to show that the taste is all over the place, and I can appreciate people who appreciate stuff that I don't appreciate.
I think a lot of it with fantasy series does come down to when you read them. And I think, you know, series that you read before you've read too much, you know, when you're younger, and then you don't have too many points of comparison, they become these totems to you. And you know, like Mistborn was to me, it was the first adult fantasy series I read when I came back to it. I basically no points of comparison other than many years back reading Harry Potter, and it just felt so fresh, so new, so invigorating. And if I had not read that, if I'd gotten into adult fantasy some other way and came back to it now, I'm sure it would not be nearly as special of an experience. But I had a truly immersive emotional experience with it, and got to the end and was shedding real tears. And I don't get too emotional in my day-to-day life, and so having these cathartic moments with books is, I think, really now personally important to me. And if an author can provide that and, you know, get that emotional investment and reaction out of me, like Guy Gavriel K. Can again and again, and Lois Master Bujold.
Yes,
like
yes.
It's becoming more rare for me, honestly, as I read more. But I think even more important that books are getting me emotionally invested.
Just to clarify, Bilibris, I'm not critiquing you. If you're talking about Sun Eater, if you are talking about Wheel of Time, I am critiquing you. But with Sun, sorry, with Sun Eater, it's more just like me looking in and going, yes, please. But not quite feeling that, and I'm wishing I was. So
yeah,
part of
it,
Howling Dark, I think is coming soon. Say again?
I think it's really wonderful to get into a series early before it blows up, before it has a huge expectations around it.
Yes,
I got in just based off seeing, you know, a Mike's Book Reviews video where he's talking about liking this sci-fi series, and I'd never heard of the author, and it was really small, and I'm like, oh, I wonder how this what this is. And you know, I didn't have high expectations at all for it, and then it just captured my my attention, like from a very early stage with the audiobooks, particularly with Samuel Rackin's narration, I just was immediately living this existence of Hadrian in this, gritty coming of age tale. And then I went through the next bunch of books, and again, no expectations, and basically knew nothing about people's reception of the books, and had a bit of a rocky time with Howling Dark at the beginning. And I'm like, oh, maybe this series isn't going to be for me in the end. I'm not too into the direction of this. But halfway through Howling Dark, like it all shifted, and I'm like, oh, I'm so into this. And then Demon of White came, and I just ate up Demon of White from beginning to end. And so with long series that have huge fandoms and big expectations, same thing with DCC. I had no expectations going in with that. Liked book 1, didn't end up loving book 2, and was like, oh, okay, maybe this series isn't going to be for me. And then book 3 caught me, and then book 4 onward, just all in on. What's difficult with series that are pretty long and that have established big fandoms expectations is that people have so much hype from mega fans who have read all the books and
yes,
didn't maybe immediately fall totally in love with it through book 1, and then people have these maybe disappointing experiences with a book 1. It's not everything they'd hoped it would be, like Dungeon Crawler Carl book 1, and it's it's pretty far from what it felt like to eventually get to Butcher's Masquerade and this novel. Like when people have those experiences, I just want to like, okay, just keep your expectations low, just wait it out, let it play out and see how it goes. But it's so tough if it's a long series and established fandom. So it's rough with Sun Eater and DCC. I think it really does make a huge difference if you get in before they blow up. I think you can't escape the psychological effects of this big hyped thing.
The Wandering Inn for me is and someone's just mentioned it actually. The Wandering Inn for me is the biggest one because I love The Wandering Inn, and I haven't read a Wandering Inn volume in a few months actually. But that seems to be utterly Marmite for people. Some people, I don't know if you've read it at all, Ben. Like some people enjoy it. Some people love it, and I love it too. And it's so Moorish. It's very much, and I use this term positively. It's like popcorn reading or candy reading, and that's not to say it doesn't have these big, sweeping, wonderful pieces of writing. Sometimes The Wandering Inn is actually really good writing, but so many people either 1-star or 5-star it. And I think because of that, you then have a fan base that is, and I should say this, if there's any Wandering Inn fans, of which I am one, the fan base is lovely, but also the fan base can be quite brittle and quite defensive very quickly. And again, it's because you have this thing that's so precious to you. I remember once, I think I posted on Reddit the fact that the one of the audiobooks for The Wandering Inn is like $65 on Audible, and I'm
Morning,
like,
Joanna.
Morning, Joanna. And I'm like, no, I'm not paying that much. And I remember a lot of people being like, I can't believe you would say that the book isn't worth $65. I'm like, no book is worth $65. Do you know what I mean? A signed copy of the Bible is not worth $65. But again, that idea of the fan base, being so large, and then also when the critique comes in, it can become a bit, what's the word, noxious or difficult to navigate. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to a certain extent, there's not much payoff in hearing the critiques of these things, and because it didn't appeal to someone else's personal taste, but it does to you, it can maybe only hurt in some ways or lessen your own experience. And Derry's talking about the Dresden problem. Yeah, people having to go through those first bunch of books. Josh experienced this recently, where it took him a long time to get through Deadbeat, but eventually reached a point where he got momentum with it and then fell totally in love. It's one of these interesting things about long series, which the kind of literary fiction world, where it's mostly these standalones, that they just don't deal with this kind of thing at all. And I think people who are just in that literary fiction community, I think often maybe don't care as much about the kind of personal emotional investment in books, that it is a bit more of an intellectual experience. And it's interesting that we in the fantasy and sci-fi community, we want these extremely emotional, personal experiences, and maybe I veered too far towards that I care so much now about, is it pulling emotion out of me? Is it feeling just immersive? I'm not trying to really analyze books critically in any way like maybe I used to. And I'm curious for you, is it of paramount importance to you to when you're reading to be able to just find a kind of immersive flow state with it? Or are you often reading from a little bit of a critical remove? I'm curious if your experience with that, especially I know Joanna's talked a lot about that. Seeing her here has me thinking about that.
I think people get misled by the level of intelligence I have because I wear glasses. And I think for me, reading should be primarily enjoyable. I think it comes. I'm going to refer you back to Uzi Jesus in the background. Yeah, because yes, I mean, as someone who studied English in university, someone who teaches literature to high school kids, there was a question way back, I think from Derry, about what I teach. Generally, I teach junior high with a smattering of high. And I love it. And I love giving kids the tools they need to analyze something critically. But I also wonder sometimes. I did a whole lesson with. Are you okay with that sunlight, Ben? You are glowing with
it. Yeah, it's totally fine. The glare looks worse than it is.
Okay. I sidetracked myself there. But sometimes I wonder, like when I give these kids these tools that they need to really excel in their exams. Like I did a lesson with my, I'm trying to think of the American equivalent, basically like 13, 12-year-olds. And I did a whole lesson on the different types of alliteration, like fricative alliteration, plosive alliteration, dental alliteration, assonance, sibilance, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I just think of that comment about you becoming resplendent. And I wonder to some extent, okay, these tools are necessary and I wouldn't be doing my job if I weren't giving the kids these tools. Yet, nevertheless, at the same time, am I kind of sucking the joy out of it? And this kind of goes back to what you were saying at the start when you got into school and you were having to read books for a mark, for a grade, ultimately, because it's not even really about the critical analysis. It's about getting an A or a B. It's something I think about sometimes. So for me, the best kind of book is one that I can read at the time, primarily for immersion. I always think the worst kind of book is the book that makes you aware you are reading it. And I don't want to name authors because that's mean.
Oh no, please do.
Okay. Sun Eater, flipping the first book. Okay, now I am coming after Sun Eater. Empire of Silence. I was always aware that I was reading a book, and I think that was part of the sadness for me, is that people talk about how immersed they were with Sun Eater, and I was always aware that I was staring at a page. I think Ian C. Esselmont can be a bit like this for me sometimes too. I think he's an amazing writer at times, but sometimes it's not so much immersion as viewing, if that's a distinction. We're going to have to snip all of this out in the edit after the live is over because I don't want to burn any bridges with authors I actually very much respect. Because Christopher Rocchio seems like a fabulous man. And I am really planning on reading Howling Dark next month. And I do think Ian C. Esselmont's stuff, when it's good, is banging. However...
thanks, Josh. Enjoy the school day.
See you, Josh. Yes, being aware of the book. Being aware of the book is perfect, Derry. And for me, why Dungeon Crawler Carl is so good, why Malazan, even though it's seen as hoity-toity sometimes, is so good, is you forget you're reading. You forget you're reading. I had that recently with I Who Have Never Known Men, which I did as part of the books that Joanna has assigned to me, that I read for January. The same thing with that. And Fever Dream, another book she assigned to me. I shouldn't use the word assigned. I asked for it. But those are two books where I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot that I was reading. And for me, that is the best kind of book. And then if you can go back and look at it again and see how the language is working and the braiding of the themes and all that good stuff, that is a tremendous bonus. But I would much rather have the immersion of the text rather than being able to dig into it with an academic trowel.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I've veered so far in that direction where it's almost the only thing that matters to me. I kind of want a little bit more balance. Like, so one of the things I'm kind of getting the urge to do is to go into some of my favorites recently, like Guy Gavriel Kay and Lois Semester Bujold, and to figure out what makes their writing so special, and maybe dig into a little bit of their prose. And because I thought when I was getting into modern fantasy with Sando and Sullivan and John Gwynne, I was living through all these immersive stories, and I knew that their prose wasn't overly complex or sophisticated or anything to write home about. But I thought that, okay, I'm not a prose snob at all. I'm the opposite. But more recently, I've been finding the more basic prose style of certain modern fantasy, like the Greatcoats or City of Stairs. Some just the more basic style is not really doing it for me anymore, and so I'm fascinated to dig into what's going on in the writing of the more complex writers like Hobb and GGK and Bujold, and figure out what's why is this immersing me in a way and getting me to suspend that disbelief and care emotionally, and to not be aware of it as a story. So now I'm just so allergic to books where I'm feeling like it's just utterly contrived, where I'm just feeling like, oh, these are just author decisions here, to get this plot into motion, or
Yes.
to make this character a little bit more melodramatic, or the dialogue doesn't feel believable. Like it's now getting harder and harder for me to just stop,
When you see the mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm resonating fully with what you're talking about, because I am also looking for that immersion and flow state, and want to just have those intense experiences where I am fully living with those characters in the moment. I'm not Ben here in New Jersey. I am not thinking about my own life concerns and work, and just I'm there with the characters 100%, and I can have those experiences, and have had them, and they're so special to me. I mean, A Song for Our Bones is just the ultimate expression of that type of experience, and just the last couple hundred pages just read in a haze of crying, and just I was there in this medieval French field with this incredible high stakes conflict that was going down, with all these characters that I'd come to care about. And
Yes.
so the authors pulled this trick of transporting me there, and it was a beautiful thing. And so I'm right there with you. I've left behind all of these kind of literary pretensions of wanting to, analyze books for, symbolism and theme. But I think maybe, like you talked about, going back after you've had an immersive experience might be interesting and worthwhile, and still valuing the kind of first read or reread of that kind of immersive experience, letting yourself have that and not being critical and analyzing as you read.
I guess a good test, if I could condense this conversation, is do you know what page you're on? Because you could be reading a good book, but if you know what page you're on, that to me is maybe a red flag, because that speaks to me of a lack of immersion. However, if you don't know what page you're on, if you've forgotten, that shows that you're in it. Another book that for me really does this is Stephen King does this. Like, I never know what page I'm on with Stephen King, even a bad Stephen King. He flows so well. And then The Terror by Dan Simmons also gave me this effect, very much so, where I was like 50 pages further on than I thought I was, and I was reading the physical copy because I was so into it. I love Song for Our Bonnet. It's the only GGK I've read, but it was fabulous. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous that you have Brightness Long Go and Lines of Elverson and All the Seas of the World and Sarantine Mosaic ahead. They're so special. I still have some. I've been trying to parcel them out over time, so I don't I can have them over the course of a few years here, but
yeah.
I don't have too many left. The Under Heaven ones, and Tigana and his earliest trilogy.
I took a really interesting just talking about kind of why some books hold us in their grip and others don't. This was like 10 years ago. It was the last year of my undergrad degree, and we had to choose a few courses to finish out the course, the mode of study. And there was a course called Literature, Mind and Brain, and I immediately chose it because it sounded so weird, and I deliberately challenged myself to choose classes that I would never otherwise know anything about. So Literature, Mind and Brain was part of that. It was the most fascinating little course, and in hindsight, I think the researcher, maybe this is really patronizing to them, but they were way out of their depth because they were an English professor delving into neurology and neuropsychology and neuroscience and how the brain works. This really interesting combination of two completely separate fields, because basically what the course was in what way, when we read a book, what happens in our brain? When we read a book, what happens? Like when you read an active voice versus passive voice, if you plug a bunch of electrodes into the brain, what fires off where? And it was fascinating. Because and there's this idea, right? For example, one thing, and this is 10 years ago, and also I didn't really understand it 10 years ago. So I'm going to try to be very, very, very minute in the things that I pick out of this course. But one thing was, I think it's called instantiation. Don't quote me on that. But the idea of when you're reading, Brad stepped on the log, where are you in your mind when you read that sentence? Are you visualizing yourself as Brad stepping on the log? Are you watching from a bird's eye view, from parallel? Are you facing Brad? Are you over Brad's shoulder? And the idea that there's all these different ways that you might be processing a book and visualizing a book and not even realizing that you're doing it. And so we had all these really fascinating classes at university where we would read a small paragraph, and then the professor would stop and say, "Listen, no, where are you when you're reading that?" and we'd all have like wildly different answers. But sometimes, and this is what's really interesting, sometimes we all had the same answer. And then the question became, what is the text doing that made us all, despite the text not saying anything, what is it about the text that's making us all experience Brad stepping on a log from a bird's eye view? And then that is where the brain stuff came in. And I understood none of it, and I completely blagged it, and thankfully passed the course. But it was very interesting, very interesting. I think that kind of speaks to immersion and authors being masterful. And then there's the question of how much are the authors aware of what they're doing, or how much of it is just coming naturally. Yeah, fascinating layers of conversation there.
And this is fascinating to think about my journey with Sanderson, because I found the books I read of his years ago extremely immersive. The Mistborn books, the first bunch of Stormlight books, and I did not have that same experience with Wind and Truth. Like, I felt like I just could not get immersed early on at all, whether it's prose choices that felt too modern for the books, or too much like internal processing of emotions. That's actually been a big one recently. That immediately kicks me out, is if I feel like the internal monologuing is not very organic, that it's kind of repetitive, goes on for longer than it feels like it needs to, or just isn't natural. And he had a lot of different characters all doing a lot of reflecting on where they're at and their current situation and what's brought them here. And I think he really erred in this. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why so many people bounced off of it. It's not because of a few word choices here and there, which were ill-advised, but I think the bigger issue was that he prevented people from getting immersed in the book at all. And if you're really immersed in a book, then I think if it's caught you, it might, the author can do a lot, I think, and get away with a lot, like, some word choices here and there that, just you fly by and you're immersed, so it's not a big deal. But I think he struggled to get anyone immersed in that book in the first place, because everyone was being so reflective and very psychologically aware in like a 2020s kind of way. And when authors are doing this a lot in modern fantasy, where they're giving characters a lot of these very, very modern, like 2020s level, like psychological awareness, which I think is a pretty recent thing for people to have all of this, psychological awareness of, maybe just goes back a few decades, and where we're all trying to be self-actualized, and with books that are epic fantasy that have a kind of grounded setting that feels, medieval or further back, or not quite modern, that there's this kind of clashing of psychological kind of styles that keeps me from getting immersed in a lot of modern fantasy these days. And I think a lot of the authors aren't realizing that that's what's happening. I don't think Sanderson really realized that he saw that a lot of people are complaining about certain word choices here and there, like saying people are dating or a therapist. And but I think a bigger issue is this kind of very recent modern psychological awareness creeping into places where it's not necessarily organic for the story or characters that have already been established. But I think a lot of modern fantasy readers also are craving this, and they're craving kind of explore their own psychological kind of conflicts and goings on, and are using books for this kind of thing. And so they actually love that, and which is great. But I'm finding I'm just prizing an immersive reading experience, and that these are things that are throwing me out and are not really working for me. And so
I think also I was just going to say very quickly as well. I think you're right on the money with Wind and Truth, but I think it's also a confusion of depth versus length as well. That just because a character is internalizing their monologue and going on for 50 pages, that doesn't mean it's any more deep than a paragraph that been done very well. Sorry, I cut you off there. I didn't mean to.
Oh no, Darius saying being self-aware is very much a new way of thinking. And I guess it makes sense that it's hard for authors that have this own psychological awareness that a lot of us share these days, to not, give their characters that same awareness and have them go through, because it makes them feel, what three-dimensional and why would we, create characters that have, an earlier kind of psychological understanding. I feel like a lot of authors wouldn't necessarily totally agree with kind of my point on this, but when I think about it done so elegantly, like Guy Gavriel Kay or Lois Bujold in the Vorkoskin books, like the characters can feel fairly modern in their psychological sensibilities, but the actual internal monologues that we get they're so much more sparse. They're little bits here and there
Yes.
of what's going on in their mind. It's often not right on the mark of the emotions they're feeling, but it's implied. There's more subtlety and implication
Yes.
in PGK and Bujold, and in a way that is much more immersive for me, especially with characters and settings that are not incredibly modern. And so if you have you read Bujold yet? No? Oh man. This when I have people on streams, I try to get kind of a takeaway recommendations from them. And I know The Culture is one that I absolutely need to do. Dark Tower is one that came out of this, where I read The Gunslinger last year and actually really liked it. I really liked The Gunslinger, but I did not have the time to continue yet. So I need to continue my Dark Tower journey this year.
I think I'm going to be rereading it this year, The Dark Tower. It's on my 26 in 2026.
Ooh, okay, that could be a good kick for me to do that. So let me know when you're doing that. But
we'll do, yeah.
Oh my God, Derry got Shards of Honor. Let's go. But I think you have this tremendous treat in front of you, the Vorkoskin saga, 16 novels, and a lot of them are on the shorter, breezier side.
Yeah.
You're gonna wish there were more. Like, this is going to be hopefully my gift to you, is encouraging you to pick up Vorkoskin, because
send me a link before we hang up and I forget. Send me a link.
Oh yeah, she is just this utter master of psychological nuance and subtlety, doing so much with so little, just little bits of the internal monologue, but also in a way that is through implication, and it's so real. It feels so witty and clever, and it's just this style of reading which is working for me right now, and the more Sanderson style of just and Rebecca Kwong style of, just ML Wong also with Blood Over Brighthaven, like, of these characters doing these deep dives of thinking through their emotional states constantly. It is, I just don't find that personally very immersive or even organic most of the time for me. I know some people probably are doing that these days, and so for them it's exactly what they're looking for. But yeah,
it's also with these authors that aren't doing it as well. It's when they have introspection with a lack of progression, right? When they just, every 20 pages, every 50 pages, the author goes, okay, I now need this person to remind us that they are conflicted about this thing. Oh, I'm so conflicted about this thing. What will I do? Okay, we've ticked that box. A few chapters on, we can't have them, even if they're having fun, got to press the conflict button again. So and I think again, Sanderson, I feel like I'm always ragging on about Sanderson, who I really like. But yeah, that's a critique of Wind and Truth, and I think it sounds as though it's interesting, because you were kind of talking earlier about whether you are a prose snob, as the phrase may be, or maybe you are, you aren't. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like for you, what makes a novel good or not is not necessarily quality of luscious prose, but subtlety and saying a lot in a line. And I think when people often say prose snob, what they mean is how nice do the words taste in your mouth. That's kind of what people tend to mean by good prose. And I think you're kind of putting your finger on the pulse of what actually good prose is, which is packing a punch and exposing things through your words. So yeah, really interesting.
Amen. And thinking about Matt Dinniman.
Sorry, I was just going to respond to Max Garfield and say that I'm finishing the trilogy this month. I'm going to be doing Destiny's Doom probably after I finish Hydrogen Sonata.
I'll be so curious to see what you make of that. That could be good motivation to get me to pick up that third book. But yeah. When you say that, it feels like I can't be a pro snob if I adore the writing stylings of Matt Dinniman in Dungeon Crawler Carl. Like, the prose is so modern and idiomatic for 2020's speech and psychological sensibilities, but it's also that's appropriate for this context. It is set in the modern day, so that's a big aspect of the psychological kind of awareness of the characters, the dialogue, the voice. That if it's actually set in the modern day, it's makes a big difference for me that it kind of fits. But also, Dinniman can just be so powerful with certain lines of dialogue. Finding getting to the core of these characters' conflicts or relationships, and often in really beautiful, deep ways, and often with very simple language, but I don't think he overdoes it. Like, these quiet moments come in the midst of all these craziness, and there's not overly much of like internal processing of emotions. And I think it helps that Carl is not a very person in touch with his emotions. And
Yeah.
I think so. He's working out a lot of things kind of subconsciously, and we as the reader are like get to see like, ooh, we think this is going on inside Carl, but he's not really talking it through with anyone or thinking it through because yeah.
No, on you go.
Oh no, just is the way Carl's character was set up. He has this had this horrible home life, and then was this orphan, and he didn't have people to talk things through with. He didn't have a therapist. Like I think it's a really interesting thing that this character himself is not very psychologically aware, and Dinniman though gives us all these clues over the course of the series about his backstory and how he interacts with other characters, and so there's all this implication involved in terms of the emotions and psychological core of the character.
We needed Kaladin to be Carl's therapist, and then we could have solved this whole issue. That crossover. I mean, Donut would have slaughtered Kaladin after a few hours, but be that as it may. I think another interesting point here that I think you're kind of touching upon is the kind of more straightforward, blokish 20-something man narration. One thing that you're able to do with that in certain series, and I totally agree that it depends on the context of the book. Dresden Files does this, and DCC does this marvelously, where because you're following these two first-person POV, starting off as 20-something blokes, you're seeing through their eyes. And maybe this is easier for me because I read these series when I was a 20-something bloke, but you think you kind of know what you're getting. And then you suddenly switch to another POV later in the series, and you're like, oh, no, these guys are psychopaths, man. Especially with Dresden. Dresden's really good at that because, Dresden's always like making jokes and being a bit silly. And he very much views himself as like this altruistic, fundamentally good guy, which you could spend ages unstitching the fact that these protagonists think they are the good guys and what that might mean. But then you switch to another character and you see that these guys are actually soaked in blood and soaked in power and barely hanging on by a thread. And you don't really get that sense, especially with Dresden. I mean, you do get a sense in Dungeon Crawler Carl that he's hanging on by a thread, but with Dresden, you're like, he always seems cool and collected and he's going to win through in the end. And then you get another perspective and you see like this brutal magic user who is a match for the gods. But because the character in the first person narration doesn't see themselves that way, you only get little splinters of that as the novels progress. And that's something that I really, really enjoy with both of these series. And I think they do it masterfully. Have you read 12 Months?
Yeah. I mean, Dresden is a personal favorite of mine. I've reread the series a bunch, so that was a release day thing when the audio became available. I dove in and I loved it. I love getting different types of books in a series. Bujold is amazing at this. In Vorkoskin, some are a little quieter, more slice of life. Some are more adventure, intrigue, and I loved getting a very different Dresden book. After the craziness of the last bunch, and he did this great with there were a bunch of crazy ones like Small Favor and Turncoat and Changes, and then a kind of different read with Ghost Story. I love that. I love that variety. And then things pick back up with Skin Game, Peace Talks Battleground, and now we have such a different one where time is passing. So we spend a year with Harry. It just felt so different in a really refreshing way, and I thought it was really nice. It was a nice little reset, and I just was. It was over way too soon. I wanted to spend more time. Like getting new Dresden was just such a treat, and I loved it. And so yeah.
I mean, Dresden's kind of the anti-time skip novel. I mean, I know that every Harry Potter too, I guess you could call this. Although there is every a year between each book and world, it does feel like because you start out with Dresden, and he's like 23 or something in the first Dresden novel, isn't he? But because you get a book basically per year of his life. Now that we're on book 19, the fact that the guy's in his mid-40s and we've watched him grow up in a similar way we've watched Harry Potter grow up. Something I really love about Dresden, that we see him progress through the meat of his life. And I know wizards are supposed to live hundreds of years long, but we get to see him grow up in that really kind of granular, slow burn way is also really lovely about Dresden. So I know that
I also love thinking about how we're tracking
the best, but I'm happy. I haven't read it yet. I bought a copy, and I'm happy to get into it because most people I've heard seem to say that 12 Months is back to form in a way that people were deflated by the previous two.
You won't hear that from me. I think Butcher was on just an incredible run from Small Favor onward, where he could not miss for me, and every book was just a 5-star, easy, fell in love with it kind of thing. But Peace Talks Battleground I look at as one book. But so one of the cool things about Dresden is that it's also tracking the journey of an author, of Jim Butcher, and I feel like I don't really know him personally at all, but just through tracking the books, getting the sense of someone who probably was a brash, immature 20-something bloke, as you would say with your, I love that Britishism. I don't think I've ever used that word before, by the way.
Now's the time.
And seeing Harry change, the series much more mature, and as Butcher had children of his own and had slings and arrows thrown at him. I know he went through some tough times personally with depression and divorce, and I think it's really interesting to see over many years with this series being written and Harry growing up, that it's Jim Butcher is growing up alongside Harry, his creation, and it just reached levels of poignance in the last bunch of books that I don't think a younger Jim Butcher would have been capable of. And same thing with Sun Eater. Like, Christopher Ruocchio wrote Empire of Silence in college. I mean, he was writing that when he was even younger and writing different versions of it. So you're getting a extremely young person who has not experienced many things in his life, and then he, over the course of the series, he gets married and has a daughter, and I think that changed him in some profound ways, and does change the series in those last couple books. And so it's one of these beautiful things about long series, is you get to see long-term character arcs and authors changing themselves, and how their own life changes affect their work and how they view the world. It's one of those big treats of like people who just read Litvick and Sandilands. Like there's this incredible journey you might be able to go on with long series that only they can offer.
What do you enjoy these days most? If you had to pick up a new series, would you prefer like a 20-book Odyssey, or would you prefer a little tidy trilogy, or what do you gravitate towards?
I have that's such a easy answer that I want the long mega series. I've tried reading shorter like trilogies in recent years, and I felt like they just did not spend enough time building out these big epic plots, and it often takes me a book to get truly invested and immersed in the setting, to get the feel for the characters. So I'm reading a standalone right now, Curse of Chalion by Bujold, and it's the standard thing with me with fantasy secondary worlds of it takes time to get totally used to the jargon and the world building terms, and to really feel grounded in the place and setting, and to really truly get to know all the characters. And that often takes me half a book or a book, and by the time standalone's over, I want a lot more time with them, and then often with epic fantasy, especially with these big, huge political sweeping plots, I feel like they really benefit from having more time baking in the oven. So one example is the Edan trilogy. I found myself not just invested in the stakes of book 2, the Prophet of Edan. It felt like we're racing to this huge, massive, continent-spanning conclusion, and we're jumping around the map. People are, and I am, for whatever reason, it just did not immerse me. It felt like things were happening too quickly. I want the slow, deliberate pacing of Tad Williams. So like, his Memory Star and Thorn trilogy I read last year was a big hit, and the deliberate pacing, the time we spend in quieter moments of little corners of the world, but actually like huge chapters in them, or and really spending our time. That's what I'm after now. And I'll be honest, the trilogy on its own was not necessarily enough for me. Like even that felt not as fully formed of an experience as I would have liked. So I'm thrilled that he went on and wrote a sequel series, because I think that's getting the full Ostenard saga is eventually what's I'm really going to need to, I think, fall completely in love with the story. So that's a really incisive question, because I think that has been a big deal for me recently of wanting a much larger scope experience than what even a very chunky trilogy can offer.
That's interesting, because I feel like for most people, they would probably go the other route. From what I'm hearing from people, okay, everyone has the series that they love, the long series that they love, and often it's read during quite a formative time. I mean, Malazan, Dark Terror, for me, Janie Warts, I know people love her stuff, and those are incredibly long books and long series. But I'm kind of noticing a trend. It seems to be that people these days, or maybe it's just the people I surround myself with, are now beginning to gravitate towards, relatively speaking, because sci-fi fantasy, smaller series, 3 to 7 books. And again, 7 books is still a massive undertaking, but I feel like a lot of people are now beginning to move in the other direction, or even standalones.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with just the feeling like you're flooded with all these options and having giant TBR mountains. And I have thousands and thousands of books on my TBR, and I could definitely see the appeal of wanting to knock out, like, ooh, I'll try this author and this author. I want to, experience more authors. And if you camp out in a giant series, then you're missing out on a bunch of different standalones and trying new authors, and or the feeling of being able to knock out a short series and like have that closure, and you in the time you can read the whole Ostenard saga, you could read a bunch of shorter trilogies, and so I think that might be part of it, and just the feeling of intimidation of longer series and I think there's definitely just a higher activation energy for people to even want to embark on those journeys. But
yeah, and like for me personally, like R. Scott Baker has been one of my most, I don't know, pleasurable is quite the right word, but I've loved his stuff. I think it's phenomenal. It was so well done. And I read book 4 of 7 flipping 7 months ago by this point, and I'm desperate to get to the next one, but I just find myself committing to various things and reads and time and wanting to read it at the right time, that I'm beginning to, and I have about 15, genuinely about 15 series like that. Robin Hobb being another one. Like, when was the last time I said that I was going to read another Robin Hobb, and I still haven't started Rainwild, and I'm desperate to. But because I have like 10, 12, 15, and Sundered Nation is another one, and Idan is another one, and Ian M. Banks is another one. Part of the reason I'm reading these books this month is to tick off a few of these series. And I don't mean that to sound negative, because I'm enjoying them, but I'm also like, I have a lot of ongoing projects, and I need to begin to wind down some of them, just so I can not necessarily even start new ones, but the ones that I currently also have ongoing, I can do them justice too. So that's why this month I really am trying to finish off a lot of trilogies and give myself a bit of breathing room, because I find myself spread very thin with my reading lately.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea, because I think to have the maximal immersive experience with a fantasy series, that things are fresh. You haven't lost all the details of the world and plot and the characters that kind of bring them to life. And I love binging series for that reason, but there are a bunch like you're describing that I've kind of left unfinished, like Dark Tower or Earthsea. I started and really loved it, just didn't continue, and so if you're living in a bunch of different stories and worlds, then I do think that does spread you thin in terms of what you're able to keep track of or care about, and so I think that's a good idea, to try to close the book on some of those series, and then have fewer things that are open-ended, and I'm trying to also be just more intentional about not starting a bunch of things. And I think I'll be able to finish the Ostenard saga this year, after starting it last year. And so like I'm so glad I'll be able to do that. And with Dark Tower, it won't be too tough for me to go back and just reread book 1. So I want to be able to.
It's a 6-hour audiobook, mate.
Yeah. So even though that's not terribly fresh, it'll be easy to go back and reread that. But one of the things I don't love also about reading new release fantasy is the idea of, even if they release a book a year, like I will lose so much momentum with that story in that year between books. And to get the most out of it, I would have to reread. And so at this point, I'm just trying to wait on the series I'm interested in, and wait until more books are out or all the books are out. And there's so many backlist things that I can focus on. And I want to take my time with them, because I treasure that kind of having that maximum experience with the book. I don't want to shortchange a series or author that I might really love if I gave it, the right reading situation for me.
I've got to. I love what you're saying, but I'm also noticing 2 comments, and I do want to address them. First of all, Derry, yes, and you know what, Derry, if maybe this is sounds like a fake compliment, but a genuinely, really, like, I want to finish Rainwild and then talk about it with you, because I had such a good time finishing Tawny Man and then jumping on that chat with you, and I'd love to do something similar with Rainwild. So I'm inviting myself, mate, But the other comment, Mac, while you're talking about your notes and references, your comments are always exquisite. And I'm deeply curious because whenever I see your comments, I'm like, oh my goodness, that must have taken him 45 minutes. So you say you have a list of notes and references. Do you kind of like have stuff ready to kind of, this is just my own curiosity and you don't have to answer. Like, do you have like a bank of stuff that you're ready to give at the right time? I'm just curious because your comments are always incredible and I love adding all your stuff to my TBR and I'd love to hear more about that. So yeah, sorry, a bit of a side tangent from what you were saying, Ben, but
yeah, no,
I saw those
I'm excited for you to get back. I had a gap in my Elderlings reading. There were a few years there between reading their Farseer trilogy and continuing with Liveship. I don't know why Liveship intimidated me so much, but once I got back in, I kind of went one a month through to the end and had a great time with it all and became so special. Rain Wilds also, I went in with such low expectations and it's so fascinating how expectations shape me. Like I can try to convince myself like I'm not affected by them, but man, I really think it pays to have low expectations or just minimal expectations of any kind for reads. And I went in with low expectations and then found I was getting so caught up in the new characters and story in Rain Wilds and was so into it. And like some of my favorite stuff, like the Temeraire books by Naomi Novik, the Napoleonic Wars with dragons, like I just picked that up after early on in my fantasy return to fantasy, where I found a couple recommendations for like, oh, if you liked Sanderson's Cosmere stuff, what should you read next? And on forums, and just saw that mentioned like once or twice, and oh, let me try that. And I fell totally in love, like head over heels in love. No expectations for this thing. Binged all 9 books in like 2 weeks, and it was magical. Just kind of, not just having a very personal experience with it. And I was also away in Vietnam at that moment and was not involved in the online book community. It was just a very personal experience and wasn't hearing critiques and, hearing the people that didn't connect with it. And I think there's also this nice magic of going into things without preconceived notions or expectations, but it's so hard because we want to pick up things like we've already talked about that have been vetted and that we think have a good chance of working for us with our limited time and the opportunity cost of reading something that doesn't hit. So there's this catch-22 of, the more you do that, like, pick up a Sun Eater with those high expectations, the less likely you are maybe to actually fall in love with it.
And you know what? I think that's what happened to me with Sun Eater. And a converse example, as we're wrapping up, I'll have to head off in a minute or two, mate, is Hyperion for me. Because Hyperion, I know Hyperion is crazy famous, but I didn't know that. I just found it in a bookshop and liked the cover. And this was back in like 2017, 2018. Before I even watched BookTube, let alone have my own channel. And I adored that book. I mean, I was staying up into the night reading it and swatting this auto light. I think I've told this story previously. Like, swatting this light to keep the light going so I could read a bit more of Hyperion. And I think if I'd known, it was a cheap Airbnb. And I think if I'd known how majestic Hyperion was, I wouldn't have had that glorious sense of discovery. And you're right. And it does very much intersect with the conversation we had previously, where we want to read things that we think are going to be good, but then we're also hamstringing ourselves because we come in, I'm just saying what you said, we come in absolutely just full to the brim with expectations and hype that we should be trying to assuage as much as possible.
Oh, that's so fascinating to think about. I had the same experience with Hyperion.
Did you?
That's so funny. It was back in 2010, the first time I was teaching in the Marshall Islands with a bunch of other college students. It was just a kind of short-term thing, kind of a semester off from college that we were taking together with a professor who had been running this volunteer teaching program there. And one of my fellow volunteer teachers had Hyperion there, and I didn't have any books myself to read out there, and she just handed it to me. And I was reading it during school breaks, just like, and I remember sitting on the kind of AC unit side of the classroom during school breaks, reading that, just entranced. Also had no clue it was a huge famous book in modern sci-fi. But that's
I have it in my classroom now, and that's not really so kids can pick it up and read it as much as I just like looking at it. I have the Broken Binding cover, which is just, I mean, when you and you know what, I'm going back and forth on Broken Binding the more I think about it. But there's a couple of their books that are really excellent, and the Broken Binding edition of Hyperion, you got 2 different choices for the dust jacket. You have their version, and you have the original version with the Shrike in the
Ooh,
meadow and
yeah,
the boat.
it's a great.
And I immediately I don't want to say I threw away the broken bindings, but I think I probably did. I think I just threw away the broken bindings edition and just immediately stuck the other edition
Yeah.
on, and I don't regret it for a second. It's a gorgeous cover.
Yeah. That
And the broken bindings
Strike
version
cover is
yeah.
is iconic. Is that a Whalen cover painting? I don't know if that is actually. That's maybe not.
Which one?
But
Hyperion.
no, it's is Michael Whelan's the famous sci-fi fantasy
Oh,
painter?
sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said whaling.
Oh.
Let me look it up while we're talking.
But I
Hyperion
love that cover. Yeah,
artist.
that cover is stunning. But
Hang on.
Gary
Gary Riddell, apparently.
Oh, okay. I don't want to credit Michael Whelan then. Great cover.
I'm sure he's
though.
wonderful.
Matt,
Thank you for
expectations.
clarifying as well. That's interesting.
Big part of how I try to recommend my favorite series. Openly tell people Hob isn't what the titles promise. Pratchett is inconsistent. DCC is coarse and Kiss. That's very smart of you, Derry. I need to do more of that hedging and tempering of expectations because my enthusiasm for what I love just gets out of control.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't expect people to fall in love with Vorkoskin, in the beginning of Shards of Honor, but if they hear me gushing about all these books, yeah, it's important to temper expectations. Yeah.
But you know what? A video I'm planning on doing. I'm flirting with the idea, and it's no time right now. But I'd love for a few people to build my anti-TBR with this in mind. Like, what books do you love that you think I won't love, and recommend them to me anyway, and let's just see what
Ooh.
happens. This idea of I'll come in with minimal expectations because you think I won't like it, but I want to honor something you love, and let's just see what happens with it. And that could be an interesting idea. But it's half baked.
Cool.
I need to consider it more, but it's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, because the catch for me, like I'm just already thinking of what I would recommend to you and it would be more like what often does not get loved by other people, but that I think you actually might like. So I guess
that's a different question, though, isn't it? That's almost the inverse. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be a tough assignment for people because I would feel not so great about recommending something that I think might actually not work for you or that. But that's interesting though. That would be a cool experiment. I think that'd be a worthy experiment for sure.
I think I'd only reach out to a couple of people. I wouldn't make it like a 10-book challenge or something like that. But like 3 books that might be up my alley, or someone else loves so much that they might even though they might contain things I dislike, still ultimately be a fruitful and rewarding reading experience. I don't know. It's just something I'm thinking about.
If there's but as we leave and get ready to depart, I want to hear because you do read a little bit more widely than I do these days. I am curious if there's, and it doesn't have to be something you've read recently, but what would be more of a literary, maybe standalone work that you might recommend for me? I'm curious if there's something that's kind of out of the modern.
GTK is literary, arguably.
Yeah, but I just mean something totally outside of the sphere of kind of modern fantasy and sci-fi.
Oh, you want outside sci-fi fantasy?
Would just not be on my radar plugged into this community.
Right. Entertain the audience for 90 seconds because I'm going to go into my Goodreads and see what I've read recently.
I definitely have enjoyed some Japanese fiction in the past by Kazuo Ishiguro, and so I know you've probably read a bunch of that in recent times, having lived there. But
so I just finished Thomas Ligotti's stuff, and this is more cosmic horror. I would call him literary. Yeah, I probably would. He's very much the successor to Lovecraft, Thomas Ligotti. So we're still working in the speculative fiction space. But if you're looking for something that has, I don't know how to describe it without sounding pretentious, more meat on the bones to analyze. Thomas Ligotti.
Yeah, that's not, I think, what I'm going for. And cosmic horror stuff, I haven't ever been into so I haven't even tried Lovecraft or that side of speculative fiction.
Yeah.
But I'm more thinking, something that's just like a modern slice of life, or something that I just wouldn't be aware of or would be on my radar otherwise, just because
does it need to be uplifting? Can it be dark?
It can be dark, yeah.
I reread No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, which is one of the most famous works of Japanese literature, and is
Oh,
hauntingly horrible.
oh wow.
It's like the Bell Jar if it was Japanese.
What's interesting is I
it's
used to
so
read
well done. Yeah,
because
and the
Litvick is
adaptation
full
by
of,
Junji Ito is really good too.
because Litvick is full of tragedy and dark works. Like I used to read so many dark things. Like I read a lot of Jan Kutseya books like Disgrace,
Yeah.
and some of the other books are extremely dark. A lot. I
Have
read
you
a lot of
Foe
war.
by Kutsu is amazing.
No, I haven't read that one.
Yeah, it's really,
but I've read
really
a
good.
lot.
Sorry,
A
anyway.
lot of war fiction too, like a lot of World War I, World War II era fiction, Vietnam. Since I lived there, I read a lot of Vietnam War kind of fiction, both written by Vietnamese authors and American authors, and some of those were hauntingly beautiful as well, like The Sorrow of War by Bao Ninh, or The Things They Carried
Yes,
and
I've
Going
heard
After
it's good.
Cacciato by Tim O'Brien. And so
I've talked about this, and my mind immediately went to this, but I didn't speak about it because I've been speaking about this thing literally every video I've done for the last like 3 months. Have you heard of Showa by Shigeru Mizuki?
No.
Shigeru Mizuki is one of the OG kind of mangaka, and he's pretty fit. He's very well known. And he died, I think I want to say in the last 10 years, but he died aged like 90. Like he was one of these guys who just was lived a very long, interesting life. And he has a 4-volume, going back to the fact that we don't really talk about manga and anime very much. He wrote a 4-volume manga series. It's also biographical. And forgive me if anyone's listening has heard me talk about this series for like the 8th time, because I'm about to just give it again. An autobiographical 4-part manga series that is both, an autobiography of Mizuki's own life growing up in, I think 1920s Japan, but also it's a biography of Japan itself, and it's charting how Japan went from the Showa era, which is 1926 to 1989, I believe, something like that. Went from fairly okay, stable country to dictatorship and fascism and totalitarianism, which obviously led to war, and then got out of it and recovered and then moved into kind of an integration with the West and specifically America. And so you have these two elements of like this personal element of what Mizuki went through in the war, particularly, and then struggling to get on his feet as a mangaka, while also this giving you some genuine, really interesting historical insights into what it was like from the Japanese perspective in this really tumultuous era. So yeah, you might be interested in that.
And that's manga. That's like graphic novel.
It's manga. It's 4 volumes. Each volume is about 400-500 pages. But when you're dealing with manga, you can whip through it a little bit. Is that heresy to say? I mean, you can. So
that sounds like it has a bigger chance of hitting for me than other manga. I've tried Berserk, Vagabond, One Piece. They all I just immediately clash so much with the kind of melodramatic sensibility of it all. Of
this is quite grounded. It's grounded because it's real, right?
Yeah.
And
that's what
it has a lot of
yeah.
elements of other stuff that I love. But I won't get into that here. It might be worth picking up the first volume, because I think a lot of people would just bounce off it immediately because it's quite dry and dusty in some ways, because you are just hearing about like policies and stuff from 1930. But because it builds into this bigger picture, and you have Mizuki's own life interspersed, and also you said that you really enjoyed stuff like Shogun. There might be a historical, connection there too.
Yeah, and I don't talk about it too much, but I was a student of history. I did study history in college, and so I just haven't been indulging that interest too much in recent years. But okay, that sounds perfect actually as a David recommendation coming out of this. For me, I feel like the obvious one is Vorkoskin, but I want it to feel like the right time for you, where you can you don't have too many competing books and series going on, that if you get into it, you'll be able to binge a bunch of them, and so that would be my major recommendation for you, on top of continuing GGK, which might be easier to fit in a standalone here and there. But,
in 12 months.
Man, oh yeah, for sure. So, and man, I get to join you in more Dinnaman stuff this year, like Operation Bounce House. I haven't been reading many light things recently, so I'm just so ready for a zany Dinnaman sci-fi read right now. Like, this is dropping in a few days, and I'm gonna be all over it. And then my goodness, like, I cannot wait for Parade of Horribles. Like,
me as well. I have full confidence in Dinnaman. even when it's not my favorite of the books, it's still a good book, except for Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon. But that's fine.
Yeah,
That was the training ground.
yeah. We needed that. We needed that to get us to DCC. But man, that was a rough read. Like, yeah, I was. It took me a long time to get there because I was not just raring to get back to it in every spare moment.
It was horrible. I was
Yeah.
not sorry. We're now going back in circles, but I started reading the physical book and I got halfway through and I switched to audiobook narration because I was really didn't want to pick it up and I was doing it while I was walking and doing the dishes. And then eventually I got to the end of it and I was just like, I'm not even sure I know what happened in those last 150 pages. It was such a mess.
Yeah.
Needed to be written, didn't need to be published. And yes,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. There was just some horrible stuff in there. I just hated. Like every time someone dies in that game, they go through like a few minutes of like the worst torture possible. It was like that was immediately putting me just in this bad place.
And the torture scene, where everything gets
the torture scene is that was one of the worst reading experiences in my life. Yeah, the torture scene. Yeah, but the larger plot just didn't do it for me either. And nothing was really.
I would say incoherent. The last third of that book, incoherent. I'll say it.
Yeah. But it's amazing. It's amazing that he went from that to DCC. Like the evolution is just it's unbelievable.
And there are elements of that same author. Like he still goes overboard in DCC, and sometimes he gets a bit incoherent in DCC from time to time. But it's much more tempered and refined.
Yeah. And even when it goes a bit overboard, like it never did it for too long where I was thrown out for too long. I could get back in pretty easily. Like things got a little crazy in the book 3 with the train plots and can't follow everything, but he brings back to scenes that are grounded and at least able to be followed, or things get off the rails a little bit with side plots and Butcher's Masquerade with these TV show characters that I don't care about, but have a couple scenes with them and then back to the regular programming. So like, he was always able to bring me back, and I never got too derailed. But I could ramble on for days and days with you here. So I'll have to have you back on at some point, because
anytime, and we will do, if not a Parade of Horribles chat, we'll certainly do a DCC chat, and I see Derry's up for it too, so we can get the band back together.
Oh, we should definitely get the band back together for Parade of Horribles. Oh, I can't wait. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. This was wonderful.
I had fun.
And thanks everyone on the chat. We got a busy chat going on. Thanks so much for stopping by and for joining the conversation. And if you're watching on replay, thanks for sticking with us. And we'll catch you later. See y'all.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.